Well, good morning. How are we doing this morning? Good, good. It's a packed house because it's an 11 a.m. only service. And we're excited that you're here. Who got enough sleep last night? You know what I'm saying? It's weird. It's 11 and yet we're still not fully awake. Well, hopefully we'll find ourselves a little bit more, awakened over the course of the next 30 minutes or so. For all of our guests in the house, I'm Eddie, one of the pastors here, and we are wrapping up a series we started about 2 weeks ago. Yeah? Entitled Following Jesus. And this series has been all about us dropping in on certain moments in Jesus' ministry, what he did, what he said, what he confirmed about what he said, what the Father wanted him to do on the planet coming into the world to be the Savior of the world. Jesus was on a mission. His hope was to seek and save that which was lost. His hope was to serve and lay down his life for many, and he did all of that perfectly. In the first week, we talked about Jesus' baptism and how for Jesus, when he went into the waters in the Jordan River, he was establishing in that moment his ministry. When he came up out of the waters and the Father spoke over him and said, "This is my Son with whom I'm well pleased," and the Spirit descended upon him like a dove, like this was the sending out moment for Jesus to let everybody know that he is who he is and the Father has sent him into this world. And then from there, he was ushered into the wilderness, and for 40 days, he did not eat. And after that time, he was tempted by Satan. And on 3 different occasions, Satan tried to get him to basically derail his ministry before it even began, to give him all the glory and him all the honor. But Jesus knew the Father. He knew God's words, and he wasn't going to allow the lies of the father of lies to disrupt what God had brought him into the world to do. And then last week, in the second episode of Following Jesus, we learned that Jesus, he is fully God. He goes up to a mountaintop. He brings his 3 inner circle guys, Peter, James, and his brother John, and he unveils to them the glory of God. This transfiguration moment on that high mountain, it was a moment not just for Jesus to show himself, but for Peter, James, and John to understand who Jesus was. And we talked about the moments that you've had with Jesus and the fact that those are impacting moments that should be changing the trajectory of your life and your faith in him. We learned so much last week that this week what we're going to do is slow down a little bit. We're going to talk about some things that happen. It was actually an argument that breaks out, a divine exchange, if you will, between Jesus and these religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees. And where we're going to be going today, we're going to be looking at the conversations that took place, the argument that ensues between Jesus and these leaders, between the leaders and themselves, between an unnamed guy and the leaders and their family. And it's all around the things that Jesus keeps saying. Because where we go today, Jesus gets into a little bit of trouble that would eventually lead him into a lot of trouble. Because Jesus has this difficult time not telling the truth. And what I mean is that he keeps saying what's true to these men who do not want to hear it. Jesus has this thing about him where he keeps claiming to be the truth. And if you'll listen to him, you will walk in truth. And Jesus has this way of having people follow along with where he's going. And it's in the complete opposite direction of where the Pharisees want these people to go. But Jesus doesn't care. He doesn't mind. He knows who he is. He knows that his Father sent him into the world. And he knows what truth ultimately is, which is simply objective reality. Truth is what it is. It's telling it like it is. It's not leaning into our feelings. It's not hoping and wishing. It's based upon fact. And Jesus himself, when he comes into the world, he keeps telling people what's true. And what's interesting about you and me in the room who know Jesus is that our story in Jesus is built upon the truth of Jesus. That what happened within the scriptures, the things that happened 2,000 years ago on the planet Earth in the Middle East during this time in history, all of this had to have gone down as it was written, or our story isn't true. But the beauty is that Jesus, who is true, has confirmed all of this, and we'll get into how he does that in a few weeks. But what's amazing is that for us in the room, we stand upon truth because we stand upon Jesus, who is the truth. And the hope is over the next few minutes that you will be encouraged and inspired to lean in to the story that Jesus is writing in your life, to the fact that he has impacted you in a way that is never going to keep you and leave you the same. And the hope is that we will go out into our world more and more and more throughout the years that we have left on the planet, and we will be encouraged and inspired to tell other people about this true story, about the truth that is Jesus. And why do we need to do that? Because we live in a world that's upside down, that believes that right is wrong and wrong is right, that your feelings dictate everything. We live in a culture that pushes back even on the scriptures and the validity that's found therein. But we know what's true because we know who Jesus is, who is the truth. And it's within that tension, within that understanding, hopefully, that I'll be able to show you some things that Jesus said. And then one thing that Jesus did, and then another thing that Jesus said on the other side of that. And then this interaction he has with this unnamed guy that will hopefully give us all that we need to leave this series and go out into our world with a better story about what Jesus has done for us. So we're going to go back to John chapter 8. We're going to spend a little bit of time in John 8. We're going to spend a lot of bit of time in John 9. And the reason why is because Jesus, he says something, like I said before, that gets him into trouble. He says a statement, and he's made a couple of these statements before, but this particular statement he says really gets under the skin of the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day. He says this one thing that really sets them off, and I'm going to read it to you now, and it's not going to sound that controversial, but when I explain it and the other things on the other side of it, this will help you see why these people did not like this man at all. In John 8, verse 12, it says this. It says, I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will never walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows after me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus is saying that without him, there is no light. Without having him, you are in darkness. And because of him, you have light so that you can see. It's a bold statement to say in front of some religious leaders. And this is what he's right in the midst of. He's talking right in the midst, this crowd of people, religious leaders, his disciples, other people. And Jesus is saying that without me being where I am on the planet, everything is dark. This is a very bold statement for Jesus to make. And the Pharisees, they have a problem with this. And they begin to ask questions like, who are you to say this about yourself? Who says this? You don't have anybody talking about you or testifying on your behalf, confirming that what you're saying is true. You're just saying this, Jesus. And he also said a couple of chapters before that he was the bread of life. That when God sent manna from heaven, that was good. It was temporary back in the Old Testament. But when he came into the world, he was this nourishing factor, this soul bread that you have to have life forever and ever and ever. And he says this statement here in John 8, I am the light. I am what's bright in the world. And without me, you don't have life. You don't have sight. You don't have light. And these Pharisees are like, who do you think you are? And Jesus explains that the Father is speaking on his behalf as well, and he's confirming these things through the miracles that he is doing day after day after day, but they don't want to see those miracles. They don't want to understand this understanding that when he teaches things, he confirms these things with miracles. So the Pharisees continue to push back, but some don't. Some actually lean in and listen to him. And this is what Jesus says to these guys in John 8:31. He said to the Jews who had believed him, if you continue in my word, you really are my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Free from what? Free from your sin. Free from your traditions. Free from the bondage of thinking that you know what you think you know. Jesus is saying, you have to come to me to get all the things that God has for you, because I am who God sent into the world to make what was right, what was wrong with the world right. I have come into the world to fix all that was broken within the world. And if you will listen and obey and lean into my words, you will know the truth. You'll know me. And the truth, who is me, will set you free. And what's wild in the room, for those in the house who know Jesus, you know this. You know this. But the Pharisees, of course, they didn't know this. Many of them are like, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, what are you talking about, Jesus? You're just a dude. Like, we have Abraham, and we have the old covenant, and we have the scriptures, and we have all these things, and you claim to be this guy, but how have you shown us who you are and who speaks for you? Jesus goes back and forth with the Pharisees, and he gets a little flustered and a little frustrated because they just don't understand the fact that they have the God-man standing right in front of them. They don't understand that who they're talking to is Messiah. So instead of them having to guess any longer how Jesus feels about himself, in John 8:58, it says this, "Truly I tell you, before Abraham was, I am." Jesus lets these guys know that he is God right there in their face, in that crowd, because he's done. He's done with the guesswork. He's done with the "are you sure?" He's done with the "can I be clearer to you?" And that might not sound like a phrase that says flat out, "I'm God," but to these dudes, it absolutely did. And here's why. About 1,500 years before that, Moses was tending a flock on a mountain. Then all of a sudden, there was this bush that was not being consumed. It was on fire, but not being consumed by the fire. And out of that bush came a voice. And that voice told Moses to tell Pharaoh to let his people go. And when Moses said, "Who sends me to Pharaoh? Who are you? What's your name?" And out of the bush, the voice of God said, "I am who I am. I am sending you, Moses, to Pharaoh to let my people go." And that same "I am," that same Yahweh, Jesus said that he was in front of the religious leaders on like a Tuesday. And these dudes were like, "Excuse me?" Now we know, right? We know on the other side of the cross and the empty tomb that Jesus can say these things because we know who he is, but these dudes had no clue, and they were getting even more clueless, it seems. They pick up stones to stone him because to say those words is blasphemy to the ears of those men. But Jesus passes right by them, passes right through the crowd, and he passes right by in John chapter 9, verse 1. As he was passing by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus has just confirmed with his lips that he is God. And then he leaves this little pressure cooker situation, walks right through the crowd with Pharisees holding rocks. And the men see this blind guy blind from birth and says, "Hey, I've got a spiritual question for you, Rabbi. Whose fault is this? Whose sin is this?" You see, there was this misconception in the culture of the day that if you had a physical infirmity, if you were blind, if you were deaf, if you were mute, if you were lame, there was some sort of sin thing happening. Like your parents messed up, or your grandparents messed up, or your great-great-great-grandfather messed up, or whatever. But this wasn't the case at all, especially in this case. And the reason why we know is because of Jesus' answer. Verse 3, he says, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. This came about so that God's works might be displayed in him. We must do the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I'm in the world," and he says it again, it's so cool, "I'm the light of the world." So he's having a conversation with his disciples. He's telling his boys, "Hey, listen, the cultural misconception is this, but here's the real deal about the situation with this man who was born blind." You see, Jesus has this way about him that's unbelievable. People keep asking him questions, and he keeps giving them answers that they're not asking. He wants to know whose fault it is, and Jesus says, "Well, I'm going to fix it, but God's going to get the glory in this. Like, we're going to do the work of the Father who sent me because my timeline is getting shorter and shorter by the day, and until I'm gone, I'm the light of the world, so let me continue to do what I do. Let me continue to show people who I am. Let me continue to confirm that the Father has sent the Son into the world like he promised years and years and years and years and years and years and years ago to the people of Israel. Let me fix all that's broken with the world. Let me get all of this wrapped up and figured out. And let me show you guys that what this guy has is not any type of sin issue at all. As a matter of fact, this dude is blind so that I can do something to show you that I'm Messiah." Verse 6, after he said these things, he spit on the ground. He spit on the ground, y'all. He made some mud from saliva, because that's how it works. And he spread the mud on his eyes. Verse 7, "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. He sent him to a pool called Sent. So he left, he washed, and he came back seeing. He left, he washed, and he came back seeing. The man left after he'd gotten mud rubbed on his eyes. He washed, and he came back seeing. Jesus did this. He spit on the ground. He made mud because dust, dirt, and wet make mud. Don't tell my shoes. If you can see my shoes, you know why I said that. He rubs this mud on this man's eyes. This man who has never seen in his life because he was born without sight. He walks down to a pool. He gets in, he washes his face, he comes out, and he can see. Some scholars say, and this is pure speculation, that the man didn't have the capability of seeing, in the sense that his eyes were not in his eye sockets. This man was so blind, he was blind, without any ability whatsoever to see. And Jesus sends him with mud on his eyes. Why? Have no idea why. I'm sure there's some sort of spiritual connection that I just not digging deep enough to find out why. But he sends this guy into the pool. The guy comes out and he can see. But there's so much more going on with this. And the story gets wilder and crazier. But the good news is we're going to stay right here in it. Because next in verse 8, chapter 9, his neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar said, "Isn't this the one who used to sit begging?" Some said, "He's the one." Others were saying, "No, but he looks like him." And he kept saying, "I'm the one. I'm the one." Jesus healed this guy's eyes. This guy comes out of the pool. His neighbors are trying to figure out who he is. They're asking questions. They're arguing amongst themselves. And he goes, oh yeah, it's me. I'm the one. Like, I'm here. Do you not see me? I see you seeing me. Why are you having a conversation about me? I'm me. I know I'm the one that was blind, been that way my entire life until like 7 minutes ago. I can see you having a conversation now. It sounds different with my eyes. Sorry. So they asked him, "Well, then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud. He spread it on my eyes and he told me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So when I went and washed, I received my sight." "Where is he?" they asked. "I don't know," he said. Now think about this. This man who had been a beggar, blind from birth, had nothing going for him in life at all. Understand, you were a cultural outcast if you had the infirmities that these people had. If you were deaf, if you were blind, if you were mute, if you were lame, you were on the outskirts of society. There's something wrong with you. But not to Jesus. No. He used this opportunity to let people know who he was. And then this guy goes and does what Jesus asked him to do. And when he goes to his neighbors and to his friends and the people knew who he was, he just told it like it is. He just told them the truth. He told them what Jesus had done for them. And he told them incredibly accurately. He put mud on my eyes. I went out of the pool called Siloam. I came out, and guess what, y'all? I could see. And then they even asked, "Well, where's he now?" And he goes, "I don't know." He didn't lie. He's over there. He didn't know. So he said he didn't know. But what he did know is that he couldn't see, and now he has his sight. And the friends around him and the neighbors, they got a little uncomfortable. And the reason why is because when this took place, it was a Saturday, a Sabbath day. And that was a holy day in that culture. And it's still a holy day to the Jewish community today. And it was something where you do not work. You don't perform any type of anything. You just rest. You chill. And yet this guy received his sight. Something happened. So they take, that is his neighbors, take this man who was born blind, who can now see, to the Pharisees and say, "Hey, we need a ruling. How is this even possible? How can God do something so incredible on a Saturday? We know this has to be God." And then some of the guys in the camp were like, no, this can't be God because it happened on a Saturday. And they're like, how is this possible? This guy was blind, born blind, and now he can see. And there was an argument, and there was a tearing between the Pharisees themselves even over this dude. So they bring in the guy's parents. But before they do that, they bring in the guy and they ask him, hey, who do you think Jesus is? You think he's a phony? You think he's a prophet? Is he a phony? Is he pulling the wool over our eyes, for lack of a better term? Or is he really who he says he is? And this dude jumps out immediately and goes, he's a prophet. He's got to be. And they're like, pipe down, guy. So they bring in his parents. Because at that moment, they don't believe what he is saying to them is true. They don't even believe the guy was born blind, if you can believe that. So they bring the parents in, and they're like, hey, can you identify your son in the room, basically? And they're like, yeah, he's right there. The one that can see, yeah. Well, has he always been able to see? No. But he can testify on his own because he's an adult. And the reason why they said that is because they didn't want to be kicked out of the synagogue, because anybody who followed after Jesus in those days were booted out of the religious community. Because standing upon the truth of who Jesus is costs you something now and 2,000 years ago. And these dudes were trying to figure this out, and yet this blind man who can now see has got it all figured out, it seems. And they bring him back in. They summon him in a second time. And in verse 24 it says this. So they summoned him in a second time, the man who had been born blind, and they told him, give glory to God, like be honest with us. We know that this man, this Jesus, is a sinner. That's their assumption. He answered, whether or not he's a sinner, I don't know. One thing I do know is I was blind, and now I can see. Then they asked him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? Verse 27, I already told you, he said, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? You don't want to become his disciples too, do you? Can you imagine the tension? Can you imagine their faces? This dude went from blind beggar to an attorney representing Jesus in front of the Pharisees. This dude has gone from I'm hoping I can eat today to I'm standing in front of the ruling class of my people and I'm telling them that Jesus is the dude that did these things to me, and they don't get it. He just continues on. It's so great. Verse 28, they ridiculed him. You're that man's disciple. We're Moses' disciples. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but this man, we don't know where he's from. Verse 30, he exclaims, this is an amazing thing. You don't know where he's from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he listens to him. These dudes should know this. This blind beggar is telling them all over the place. Verse 32, throughout history, no one has ever heard of someone opening the eyes of a person born blind. That's a fact. If this man were not from God, listen to the logic. If this man were not from God, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Can you guys feel it? You see, Jesus meets this guy on the side of the road. He spits on the ground. He rubs mud in his eyes. This guy goes and does what Jesus says, comes back seeing, but he has so much more insight than he ever thought he would ever have. This man goes into the pool because Jesus said to. He comes out with something he wasn't expecting, sight, but then he picks up insight, an understanding about what God is up to in the world. Jesus made this for me. Jesus did this for me. It's because of Jesus that I am where I am right now. And what's remarkable is that when he goes in front of these religious guys, these ruling class leaders, and he stands there and he provides a testimony about who Jesus is, it makes me think back to that conversation that Jesus had in John 8. Where he tells these guys, I'm the light of the world. And they're like, well, who are you to say this about you? And then he finds a blind beggar to testify on his behalf in front of these guys within like 45 minutes to an hour. Jesus didn't need this guy for his testimony. Jesus was showing this guy and everybody around that, hey, when I say who I am, I need you to pay attention. When God sent me into the world, he gave me a timeline to work things out, to let everybody know that I am who I am. That the Messiah has come, that you don't have to look for anybody else. You don't have to consider or question or worry where I came from. The guy said, if he didn't come from God, he wouldn't be able to do anything, and yet here I am looking at you with my eyes. The eyes that he might not have even had an hour and a half to 2 hours before. But of course, the Pharisees respond like the Pharisees respond. Verse 34, you were born entirely in sin, they say. And are you trying to teach us? Then they threw him out. This man was a blind beggar on the outside of his community. Jesus shows up to him and does the unthinkable, the miraculous, the unbelievable. And this guy stands before the religious leaders and says, hey, this Jesus, he's done these things. This Jesus is from God. Oh, is he a phony or is he a prophet? Oh, he's a prophet. He has to be. Because God doesn't do these kind of things unless God's in these things. If it was on a Saturday, okay, fine, whatever. But God is up to something in the world. And while Jesus is in the world, we're going to push pause and take a time out on the traditions of the day. Because he has work to do. He has things to show people. He wants people to understand that he is here for them. And this man's story was forever impacted. And this man was told to get out again. And it wasn't a sin problem, even though they said it was. It was a truth problem. He couldn't quit talking about Jesus. He couldn't quit telling people what he was doing. And then verse 35, it just gets so much better. Jesus heard that they'd thrown the man out, and when he found him, because Jesus was looking for him, hello? Jesus was looking for this dude. He asked, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him, he asked. Jesus answered, you have seen him. Isn't that nice? In fact, he is the one speaking with you. I believe, Lord, he said, and he worshiped him because of course he would. Jesus said, and this is the teachable moment, I came into this world for judgment, in order that those who do not see will see, and those who do see will become blind. Jesus is saying that for those in earshot of him, for anybody that wants to know what it's like to truly experience God and to know what spiritual life is really all about and to understand what it truly means to be in relationship with the Father and have true religion, you have to come through me and I'll give you sight. Because you are blind, and if you understand your blindness, then you will understand that I've come to give you sight. I've come to give you this relationship. I've come to take care of your sin. I've come to give you what ultimately you need. But if you don't see this, if you think you can see, if you think you've got it all figured out, if you think you have the religious boxes all checked off, then you will just continue to descend into blindness, and you just won't get it. You just won't get it. I mean, the Pharisees were right there in his face. He just kept talking to them and sharing with them and showing them, and they were like, nope, 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 no, 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 no. I'm not looking at you. I can't hear you. La, 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 la. And here's how I know. You ready? Verse 40. Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these things and asked him, we aren't blind too, are we? Jesus said, if you were blind, you wouldn't have sin. But now that you say, we see, your sin remains. These men had such a darkness of heart, such a push away of what God was ultimately up to in the world. And these are the religious leaders. That Jesus says, listen, if you understood your depravity, if you understood that you had problems, if you were humble in the slightest, then there would be an opportunity for you to see. But because you think you're better than, you don't need me, that you can do this life without me, that religion is going to get you where you need to go, and it's not through me. I mean, fellas, I showed you who I am. I told you before Abraham was born, I am. I'd let you know if you hold on to my words, I will show you the truth, and the truth will set you free. I told you I was the light of the world. And yet these dudes were like, I'm not sure. They didn't want to know. They didn't care. And this is where Jesus leaves these guys that day. But that blind beggar who can now see the joy he has in his life and where he's growing in his relationship with God through Jesus. I mean, this is the stuff that we need to be picking up on. This is the stuff that we need to be like, oh my gosh, is that me? Is this me? Can I be him? I want to be him. I think I should be him. I would really like to have my experience with Jesus like this guy had. Jesus finds this guy. He says, hey, do you want to believe in the Son of Man? He's like, point him out to me. I got it. Where is he? Where's he at? I will. Yeah, for sure. What do you want me to do? You want me to do something? I'll stand on one foot. Jesus says, I am the Son of Man. Guy says, all right, I believe. And he worshiped him right there. It's just a powerful moment. Just an unbelievable thing. So what does this have to do with us? This is an event that took place 2,000 years ago. This is an event that happened in a country that we're not anywhere close to on the map. But the impact of what happened here and what happened later is why you're here. The story of Jesus, the truth that he is, that we stand upon as followers of him. There should be this encouragement to continue to move in the direction of where he is. Why? Because we have been given eyes to see. That your heart has been opened to the God of the universe through Jesus, that there was this moment for you that forever changed your life, just like this guy who was born blind. And because of who Jesus is and because of what Jesus has done, we should be carrying our story into our world with boldness, with truth. We don't live based on our feelings. We don't live based on the cultural milieu of the day. No. We have Jesus, and as a result, we find ourselves standing firm on who he is and what he has done. And we mature in this. We grow up in this. Because as you look through this story, this guy became more confident, more bold, more willing to testify on behalf of Jesus, of who he really was, because he was showing me what it looks like to follow Jesus. I don't know how all of it played out. I'm not sure what the rest of his life looked like, but I would bet that he just continued to walk with Jesus from that day forward. He continued to find him when he could, and he would spend time with him when he could, and he would listen to him when he could, and he would do all those things so that he could be continuing to grow up in his relationship with Jesus. Is that you? Is that me? Because this is the challenge. A lot of us, we gave our lives to Jesus at some point in our life. Are we continuing to grow up in that relationship from that point? This man seemed to. This is what it feels like God's calling us to. For us to not just live in the past of what God has done for us, but to understand that we are continuing to move by the grace of God, by the Spirit of God, into a deeper relationship with him through Jesus. And it takes a little bit of understanding, a little bit of remembrance, a little bit of, oh yeah. What Jesus did 2,000 years ago made an impact on me at some point in my life, and it can continue to do that every day of my life if I will engage with him. And this is what he wants for his kids. And it doesn't matter if you're 14, if you're 24, 34, or 74. God wants you to continue to grow up in your relationship with him, because he's got some things to show the world around you about the love he has for them. And for those in the house who don't know Jesus, my hope is over the last 3 weeks that you've been able to see a clearer picture of who he is. That you understand that the followers of Jesus follow Jesus because of who he is. Not because of what we've done. We've done nothing, much of nothing. We're like that blind beggar posting up on the corner. We just caught a moment with Jesus. And our eyes were opened and we were given fresh insights into how to live life because of who Jesus is and what he told us in his word. And we're just living in that moment. Do you want to know this man who is more than a man? We've got an opportunity as we go into the next few weeks. We're going to continue to hear some more about Jesus in this ministry and the works that he continued to accomplish on this earth. And the hope is that we will continue to grow. That we'll continue to understand that Jesus did some things while he was here. And one big thing that I want us to hold on to as we go into these next few weeks is this. That Jesus exposes the darkness in our lives. And he gives us the eyes to see. If you're willing to use them. If you're willing to hold on to him, he is going to do some things in and through you that will dramatically and drastically change the future of your life. And maybe even your kids' lives and your kids' lives. But it's all predicated on us recognizing and understanding who Jesus is and that we are following after him. So this is where we are. And this is where we're going. And the hope upon hope is that you will find a joy in the Lord that is beyond all the circumstances that you have. And hopefully this story, this back and forth that Jesus had with the Pharisees, this interaction he had with this man who was born blind, the man who was born blind's interactions with the Pharisees and his family and their friends, and then Jesus again will hopefully encourage you to stand upon truth and to understand that this Jesus is who he says that he is. And that if you're following after him, you're following after the one true God. And this, my friends, is where we want to be. Because Jesus really is the light of the world. So as we wrap up our time together, we're going to take communion. I'm going to pray. And you guys are going to have a moment to spend some time with Jesus. Thinking about him, praying to him, confessing to him, remembering his broken body and his shed blood on the cross. The band's going to play a song that hopefully will be a little reminder about how incredible our Jesus is and where he wants our hearts to be because of who he ultimately is.